What if you could turn genes on and off without ever cutting your DNA? What if the climate models we all rely on are just too optimistic? And what if a famous fossil just blew up the human family tree as we know it? Well, this week, it feels like science is rewriting all the rules. Let's dive in.
Welcome to your Science News Briefing. We're not going to waste any time. We're jumping straight into the major discoveries from this past week that are completely reshaping how we think about medicine, our planet, and, yeah, even our own past.
So, first up, let's talk about health and medicine, because a massive development in genetics is really leading the conversation right now.
Okay, the big story is this absolutely revolutionary step forward for CRISPR gene editing. Get this, researchers have figured out a way to reactivate genes without making a single cut to the DNA strand itself. This is just so much safer and more precise than anything that's been possible before.
So, how in the world does it work? Well, it all comes down to a process called gene silencing. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Some of your genes have these little chemical tags attached to them. The scientists call them molecular anchors, which is a great description because they literally hold a gene in the off position, stopping it from doing its job.
And this is where you can really see the genius of it. The old CRISPR methods, they were kind of brutish. They often involved physically slicing the DNA to shut a gene down. Super powerful, sure, but also pretty risky. This new method, though, it's so much more elegant. Instead of cutting anything, it just removes those chemical anchors. And just like that, the silenced gene switches back on, completely unharmed.
So why is this such a game changer? Well, a couple of reasons. First, it finally settles a huge scientific debate, proving that these chemical tags are what's actively silencing genes. But more importantly, this opens the door to a whole new world of gene therapies. Therapies that could be not just safer, but maybe even reversible. That's huge.
And it was a really busy week for health news all around. In a quick lightning round, researchers are developing safer ways to make our cells burn more calories. Other scientists are now using CAR T-cell therapy, from cancer treatment, to help aging guts actually heal themselves. And a big study found that a lot of everyday chemicals are quietly damaging the good bacteria in our gut.
Okay, next up we're shifting gears to our changing planet. And there's a critical new finding here that's really challenging some of the core assumptions in climate science.
The headline is a big one, you guys. It turns out that plants might not be able to soak up as much carbon dioxide from the atmosphere as our climate models have been counting on.
And the whole thing really boils down to this one number. A new study found that we've been seriously miscalculating a key ingredient for plant growth, nitrogen. The natural process that makes nitrogen available to plants, turns out we've been overestimating it by about 50%. That is a massive correction.
So what does that actually mean? Well, it's pretty simple, really. You can think of CO2 as fertilizer for plants, right? But it only works if they have enough of the other nutrients. With less nitrogen in the system than we thought, plants are basically maxed out. They just can't use all that extra CO2 to grow.
And the implication here is pretty significant. This finding suggests that our major climate models may have been too optimistic about how much of our carbon pollution nature can clean up for us. It's a critical reality check that scientists are going to have to factor into all future projections.
Elsewhere around the globe, scientists are watching a major Greenland glacier literally crack open as meltwater just drains through it in these huge, dramatic bursts. On a more hopeful note, a simple chemistry trick could let us design forever plastics that are actually built to fall apart on command. And a new study on coral reefs found they could produce almost 50% more food if we just allowed fish populations to recover.
All right, for our final segment, we are looking at discoveries that are forcing us to just rethink everything, from our own evolutionary story all the way to the bizarre connection between the Earth and the Moon.
So one of the absolute biggest stories this week comes from the world of paleoanthropology. A brand new analysis of the legendary Littlefoot skeleton is forcing a major rethink of where we all come from.
The international research team behind the study says this incredibly complete fossil is probably not what we thought it was for all these years. Their work suggests that Littlefoot might actually belong to an entirely new species of human ancestor.
Now, if this gets confirmed, it is a huge deal. It would mean adding a whole new branch to our already complicated human family tree. The story of how we got here would suddenly become even more intricate and, honestly, way more fascinating. And in another just totally surprising discovery, it turns out the Earth has been feeding the Moon for billions of years. It sounds wild, but here's how it works. Tiny particles from our upper atmosphere escape into space. Now, you'd think Earth's magnetic field would block them, but nope.
It actually grabs them and guides them, funneling them along these invisible lines that stretch all the way to the moon, where they get dropped off right on the lunar surface.
And let's wrap up with a few other mind-bending stories. New research suggests AI might not need those massive training datasets if we design it to work more like a biological brain. Physicists smashing protons together found a hidden, unexpected order in the boiling soup of quarks and gluons they created. And archaeologists figured out that Egypt's famous Karnak temple was built on a really unique island of high ground that literally rose up out of the ancient Nile's floodwaters.
So, after a week packed with breakthroughs like these, what's the big picture? What does all this really tell us?
The one common thread through all of these stories is that our fundamental assumptions are being challenged and rewritten everywhere you look. It doesn't matter if it's the code in our own DNA, the climate models we use to predict the future, or the fossils that tell our origin story. New data is forcing us to update our understanding of absolutely everything. And that really leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? In a time when our knowledge of genetics, the climate, and our own history is changing this fast, you just have to wonder, which big, long-held belief that we all take for granted is going to be the next one to be completely rewritten?